The sun reigned like a silent monarch over the Los Angeles skyline, painting gold across every rooftop, tree leaf, and pool surface. From the edge of our infinity pool, an architectural masterpiece perched high above the city, everything below looked smaller, quieter, less significant, just the way I liked it. The water mirrored the curated calm of my life, immaculate, still, untouchable. At least, until 8:07 a.m. A notification pinged softly against the screen of my phone, just one message, innocent, harmless, sent to the wrong person, or so he thought. Can't stop thinking about last night. You left your earring in my car. Again, no name, no context. Just a sentence meant to remain in the shadows of deceit. My breath didn't catch. My heart didn't race. No dramatic glass-shattering moment. Just silence, pure, cold. Cutting silences, I stared at the words that shattered everything I had so carefully built. I turned my head slowly to look at the hills beyond, a breeze lifting the edge of my silk robe. He was still asleep inside, wrapped in the same Egyptian cotton sheets we had flown in from Italy. The same bed he used to make love to me. The same bed, I now realized, that was just a prop in a stage play called The Perfect Marriage. He hadn't just cheated, he had insulted me with cliches. Late meetings, a sudden obsession with fitness, business trips that left no digital trace. I'd noticed, of course. The subconscious always collects the puzzle pieces before the conscious mind connects them, and now I saw the whole sickening picture. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building a parallel life financed by my name, my inheritance, my family's empire. The same empire my father built with blood and brilliance, the same name he had sworn to honor. I should have cried, I should have thrown something, but instead, I poured another cup of coffee. He thought I was a trophy, a porcelain wife, smiling on red carpets and quiet in boardrooms, a name to borrow credibility, a face to present at galas, a figure to appear in his curated lifestyle brand. What he forgot, what so many men forget, is that some women aren't just pretty, we're dangerous. That morning, as he snored under his $30,000 duvet, I walked through our home like a ghost, every room a memory, every hallway echoing with echoes of our scripted life. I walked into his office, the one I wasn't supposed to touch. My fingers hovered over his laptop. He never changed the password. A narcissist's mistake. Within minutes, I had access to 3 shell companies I'd never heard of, accounts I'd never signed off on, and 1 transfer to an LLC in the name of Sierra Haven. Sierra Haven, an expensive cabin in Big Bear, supposedly for team building. Retreats. I now knew better. I didn't confront him. Not yet. There was something more satisfying than a screaming match. Something more elegant. Destruction. By noon, I had called Sophia, my family's private counsel. She didn't ask questions, just cleared her schedule. By 2 p.m. I had a private investigator on retainer and forensic accountants scanning every line of our joint portfolios. By nightfall, I knew the name of the mistress, Aubrey Sinclair, 28, Instagram model turned wellness entrepreneur. She had 32,000 followers, a luxury apartment downtown, and a face that could launch 1,000 DMs. And all of it, her entire existence, was paid for by my family's wealth. I stared at Aubrey's latest post, her laughing in the passenger seat of a car I had bought. My hand twitched, but I didn't reach for the phone. I had more important things to do than rage comment under filtered lies. I closed the app. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet, That night, I crawled into bed beside him. He wrapped his arm around me like he always did, sighing as he mumbled something about long day tomorrow. He smelled like imported whiskey and someone else's perfume as he drifted off. I stared at the ceiling, my mind already 10 steps ahead. He thought he'd won, that he'd fooled me. He didn't know that I was raised in boardrooms, not ballrooms, that I'd watched my father destroy grown men with a nod and a line of legal text, that my mother taught me how to smile while ending a dynasty. No, he didn't marry a housewife, he married a strategist. By the time the first raindrop of dawn tapped on the bedroom window, I had already begun dismantling his kingdom, quietly, strategically. As the morning fog lifted from the canyon and sunlight returned to our marble sanctuary, I sat in my study, formerly my husband's private retreat, and began the first draft of his downfall. He was in the gym, shirtless, grunting under the illusion of control, likely sending Aubrey a good morning selfie. He had no idea his world was already tilting beneath his feet. On the screen before me, spreadsheets, trust documents, quarterly business reports with his forged signature on my family's accounts. It was worse than I thought. He hadn't just been siphoning from the joint fund, he was redirecting investments from my family's foundation, laundering money through dummy shell companies like Hollow Oak Partners and Alara Innovations, names that meant nothing but were filled with millions. And that meant one thing: felony. I called Sophia again. I want to restructure the Matheson Trust, I said calmly. She didn't ask why. You want a discreet firewall between your personal assets and his? Yes, everything in my name goes into irrevocable trust. If he's linked to it, pull it out. If he holds any power of attorney, revoke it. Quietly, legally. She paused. Impressed. Your father would be proud. I'm not doing this for my father, I said. I'm doing this for myself. For the next 2 weeks, I became 2 women to the outside world. I was still the impeccable wife, smiling beside him at gala dinners, clapping at his keynote speeches, whispering sweet nothings as cameras flashed. But behind that mask, I became a ghost that haunted every ledger, every contract, every secret drawer. I booked rooms under false names in boutique hotels across the city. There, in anonymity, I met with investigators, cyber forensic experts, and my father's most trusted financial mercenaries. We mapped out every asset he touched. The beach house in Malibu owned by a Nevada LLC, the Mercedes SUV he claimed as a business expense, the $400,000 he wired to a consulting agency that didn't exist, except on paper, under Aubrey's name. One night, I sat in one of those hotel rooms, sipping black coffee as the investigator slid a file toward me. Inside, photographs. Aubrey at the private airstrip, Aubrey at the Beverly Hills jeweler, Aubrey laughing beside my husband on a yacht that had been renamed Serenity, a boat he claimed to have sold 2 years ago. He had lied about everything. I couldn't sleep. Not yet. The next morning, I visited my father's grave. The wind at Forest Lawn whispered through the rows of marble names. I stood over his headstone, the cool stone grounding me. You told me never to let a man play me, I whispered. You said power isn't loud, it's surgical. I placed a white rose on the grave and walked away. My resolve complete. Step 3 was Aubrey. Most women would have confronted her, shouted, threatened, shamed. But I wasn't most women. I became someone else. Leona Graves, a venture capital scout looking to invest in women-led wellness startups. It was almost laughable how quickly she responded to my outreach. She arrived for our meeting in head-to-toe beige, sunglasses too large for her face, carrying a quilted designer bag I recognized from my own closet. I kept my voice warm, friendly, admiring. "You're magnetic," I told her. "I can see why. Investors would follow you." She grinned, flattered. "It's about energy, you know. When women are in their divine feminine, money flows naturally." Oh, it flowed, all right. She handed me her pitch-decker, rushed PDF full of pseudo-spiritual buzzwords and budget projections. What she didn't realize was she'd also included business records tying her directly to fraudulent accounts registered under my husband's primary business. She had signed bank forms, lease agreements, even legal contracts, and now I had copies. She left, smiling. I said, "You have a beautiful future ahead of you." She didn't realize what I meant. Back home, I began orchestrating subtle leaks. An anonymous tip to the IRS about unreported assets. A message to a financial blog about questionable offshore activity tied to emerging wellness brands. Nothing traceable, nothing illegal, just seeds. Seeds I knew would grow into vines that strangled Dot at night. I continued playing the perfect wife. He brought me gifts, trying, perhaps, to appease the guilt he didn't think I knew about. He held my hand at dinners, spoke proudly of our vision for the future, and never noticed the shift in my eyes. He still thought he was the hunter. He never realized he was the prey. The final nail came, unexpectedly, in one of the dummy company folders, buried under insurance documents. I found something almost poetic, a prenup draft I'd never signed, an early version of our agreement in which he requested full control of my father's legacy assets. He had actually planned for this long ago. I stared at it for a long time, my hands calm, my chest still. This wasn't just betrayal. This was ambition. He married me with conquest in mind. I had just been the doorway to the fortune. What he didn't realize was, the fortune was just the beginning. Before the week ended, I filed papers to transfer controlling interest of all Matheson subsidiaries into a multi-tiered trust, airtight and completely out of his reach. On paper, it looked like simple estate planning, but to him, it would feel like the floor collapsing beneath his designer shoes. And I smiled, not out of triumph, but because I knew what came next. The trap was set, and the bait was ready to bleed. It waits not for the right moment to strike, but for the moment they think they've won. That moment came exactly 3 weeks after the text message that shattered everything. He came home that night, grinning, a bottle of Dom Perignon in one hand and a gold box in the other. "A surprise," he said. "Closed the Madison deal today. This deserves celebration." I smiled as he handed me the box. Inside, a Cartier bracelet. The irony almost made me laugh. I had just discovered that the Madison deal had gone through because he'd funneled investor capital through a ghost shell funded by my name. Technically, he had closed the deal legally. I let him pour the champagne. I let him kiss me. I let him think we were still us. He never suspected that I was holding the match, and the blueprint to his empire was already soaked in gasoline. That night, after he fell asleep in the living room, mouth half open, breath reeking of liquor and self-congratulation, I walked silently into his office. I had a plan. Not to expose him all at once. That would be messy. Uncontrolled. I would erode him slowly, strategically, so that by the time he realized, everything he touched would already be ash. The first crack was public. I leaked select portions of Aubrey's business filings to a gossip journalist I knew from my non-profit's media board. The documents weren't just suspicious, they were humiliating. Headlines followed: wellness guru or fraud. Aubrey Sinclair's startup linked to tax havens. LA socialite accused of laundering funds through boutique brands. Within 48 hours, Aubrey's Instagram went dark. Comments flooded her last post. Sponsors pulled back. Her meditation app vanished from the store. He never even mentioned it. Not to me, not to anyone. But I watched him, tight-lipped at breakfast, scrolling through his phone like it had betrayed him. Step 1, isolate him. Step 2, freeze him. I had quietly shifted our joint assets into multiple irrevocable trusts. I froze access to 5 accounts under audit-friendly pretexts: minor errors, security reviews, routine verifications. He called the bank. They apologized. He called again. They stalled. He paced our living room, chewing the skin round his nails, muttering about incompetence. Still, he didn't suspect me. His ego wouldn't allow the thought. Men like him never expect the knife to come from their own bed. I planted the next piece of bait in his assistant's inbox, an email, accidentally forwarded, with hints of a whistleblower report to the SEC. It mentioned potential internal fraud. It referenced accounts tied to him. I knew he'd see it. Knew he'd panic. Knew he'd start covering tracks, deleting files, shifting money into newer, even riskier havens. What I didn't expect was how desperate he'd become. He called his lawyer the next day. I watched from the staircase as he hissed into the phone, "Just fix it. If the board gets wind of this, I'm done. Fix it." Oh, he had no idea how broken it already was. I orchestrated the internal leak to his own board. Members just enough to make them paranoid. A few whispers about compliance issues and unauthorized investment schemes did the job. 2 of his closest partners pulled out of a pending merger. His calendar began to collapse like a house of cards that week. For the first time in years, he didn't book a single flight. He was grounded, literally and metaphorically. Then came the party, a masquerade fundraiser hosted by one of our mutual friends, a high society event packed with actors, tech giants, media elites. Everyone would be there. I wore red, not crimson, not burgundy, red. A quiet message to him: I am not mourning. I am celebrating. He tried to act normal, smiled for the cameras, toasted the host, but I saw it in his eyes, the fear behind the grin, the stiffness in his shoulders. He was unraveling, fast. Halfway through the night, the bomb dropped. A reporter approached him on record asking about ongoing investigations into his offshore holdings. He blinked, said something about confusion and false reports, but his voice cracked. The moment went viral by morning. After the party, he finally confronted me. "You've been distant," he said. "I've been busy," I replied, sipping wine. "With what?" I smiled, preparing for the future. He stared at me like I was speaking a different language. I could see the flicker of doubt gnawed just beneath the surface. He was starting to feel it. The weight of invisible hands pulling strings he couldn't see. Good. The next morning, the IRS froze 2 of his shell accounts. The SEC opened a preliminary inquiry, and Sophia filed the first motion for divorce citing breach of fiduciary trust. He found the papers neatly placed on his desk beside his espresso machine. When he read them, I was already gone. Not far just to the guest house at the back of the property, but far enough to make my point. You don't know where I am anymore, and you no longer deserve to. I watched him spiral, Calls went unanswered. Emails flooded inconcerned board members, frightened investors, distant relatives trying to separate themselves from the fallout on his face, once on the covers of business magazines, was now cropped into headlines with words like embezzlement, infidelity, and fraud. He came to the guest house one night, pounding on the door. "Talk to me," he shouted, but I didn't answer. I let the silence be his teacher, and I smiled knowing I had become the ghost he would never stop chasing. The courthouse smelled like polished wood, coffee, and fear. I stood beneath the high marble columns, dressed in comtelid, minimal, precise. Red again, of course. A different shade this time, deeper, more deliberate. This was no longer a warning. This was war.news. Vans circled like vultures, parked along the curb with their telescoping mics and breathless anticipation. Rumors had already leaked his shell companies, the audits, the affair, the looming financial collapse, but none of them had the full story. Not yet inside. The room buzzed with the kind of electricity only a public unmasking can create. He sat across from me at the defendant's table, a once daring man now wrapped in uncertainty. The confident arrogance he wore like armor had cracked. His hands fidgeted beneath the table. His jaw twitched. I didn't look at him. Instead, I turned to Sophia, who sat beside me, papers neatly stacked, eyes sharp. She had flown in 2 expert witnesses, forensic accountants, cybersecurity analysts. Women, both of them. That wasn't a coincidence. The judge entered. We rose. Case number 30,492. Petition for divorce. Division of marital assets. Breach of fiduciary responsibility. And with that, the show began. The first act, financial treason. Sophia presented documents, mapping out every dollar that had been funneled from Matheson Trust, accounts into shell companies under his name, projected onto the courtroom screen. Timelines, wire transfers, digital forgeries, all orchestrated during our marriage, all signed sometimes in my name, sometimes in his assistant's, but always traceable back to him. He tried to object, claimed the documents were taken out of context, claimed the accounts were business development funds. But our analyst, calm as still water, responded, "Your Honor, business development doesn't usually involve transferring funds to an account registered under a girlfriend's lifestyle blog." The courtroom chuckled. He flushed. I remained. Still, Act 2, the affair. This wasn't about the sex. This was about intent. About how he used our shared identity, my last name, my legacy, as leverage to fund a secret life. Sophia played a clip, security footage of him entering a penthouse with Aubrey during a supposed board retreat. Time-stamped, confirmed, paid for using the card assigned to the Matheson Family Foundation. This is fraud. The judge murmured. He shifted in his seat, glanced at me for the first time. I didn't blink. He took the stand on the 3rd day. "I built my company from scratch," he insisted. "She didn't care about the business. I was just trying to protect my future." "By laundering funds?" Sophia asked. He hesitated. "They weren't laundered. They were moved." "Moved," she echoed, eyes narrowing. "To where?" the judge asked. Silence. And then, almost theatrically, Sophia pulled out the final envelope. Inside, the prenup draft, the one he had written before we were married, the one I never signed. In it, he demanded control over the Matheson Trust in the event of relationship complications. The courtroom shifted in collective discomfort. "This wasn't love," Sophia said. her voice cool. This was strategy. He didn't marry her. He targeted her. Gasps. A reporter scribbling furiously. He tried to speak, but what could he say? That he loved me, that it was a mistake. His face said it all. The disbelief of a man who thought he would always have the upper hand. A man who finally realized the rules had changed. The judge adjourned for deliberation. I stepped outside. Cameras surged forward. Did you know about the embezzlement? Is it true he forged your signature? Will you take the company to? I said nothing, not because I didn't have answers, but because silence was the only language he'd ever respected and the only one he could never control. Inside, the gavel dropped judgment in favor of the petitioner. I was awarded 70% of all joint and business assets. All shares of the company I had originally helped fund were returned to me. The judge froze his remaining accounts pending federal investigation. He slumped, literally, like the air had been knocked from his chest. His lawyer patted his shoulder. I picked up my handbag. As I walked through the corridor, flashes lit the marble, like lightning strikes. Reporters shouted my name. Strangers applauded. But I didn't stop. I walked straight through the noise, down the steps, into the quiet afternoon light. That's when the photo was taken, the one that went viral. Me in red, chin lifted, walking away as he stood behind, mouth open in disbelief, holding nothing but a court summons. Later, at home, or what was left of it, Ty stood by the pool again. The same pool from weeks ago, but everything had changed. He had been removed from the deed. His company board had already started the vote to remove him. His mistress had left LA. His face had disappeared from magazine covers. He was no longer a mogul. He was just a manholo, broken and irrelevant. And I was finally free. Some people disappear in shame, some in sorrow. I disappeared in triumph. It wasn't about hiding. It was about vanishing with intention, erasing the version of me that he created. The woman who smiled beside him nodded politely and played the part of the ornamental wife. That woman was dead, and in her place, a ghost with a name he could no longer touch. The headlines didn't stop. Billionaire husband loses everything in divorce scandal. She walked out with 70% and left. Him with the IRS. Wife of fallen tech CEO quietly relocates after public win. But they never found me. Because I didn't just leave the house, left the narrative. 1 month after the court ruling, I sold the hillside mansion. Quietly, an all-cash deal under a holding company. The pool, the glass, the view, it had served its purpose. Now it was just glass and stone soaked in memories I refused to keep. He tried calling me, of course. He did. 6 missed calls the day after the sale. 3 voicemails, pathetic, wounded, half-hearted apologies, buried in self-pity. We were great once, weren't we? Maybe we rushed into divorce. We should talk. You didn't have to destroy me, but I didn't respond. Because I didn't destroy him, he did. I simply removed the safety net. I moved without noise. First to Florence, my mother's city. A villa tucked between vineyards. Silence wrapped in lavender air and cobblestone. No paparazzi, no headlines. No footsteps behind mine. There I spent a month alone. No emails, no lawyers, no spreadsheets, just peace. I swam in cold rivers. I walked barefoot on dew-covered grass. I remembered who I was before he tried to define me. I met no one. One missed. No one. I watched the sun rise and set as if it had never once shared its warmth with him. The world kept spinning. He faced federal inquiries for tax, fraud and financial misconduct. The board of his company voted him out. Aubrey tried to rebrand herself, but the internet never forgets. She deleted her accounts a month later. By then, my foundations had already been rebuilt under new names, new trusts, new layers of protection. I had created a network of ownership so deeply veiled that even the best corporate spies wouldn't find me. And the most poetic part, all of it, every dollar, every company, every home was mine. But I no longer needed to display it. 6 months after my vanishing act, I walked into a cafe in Portugal. Simple ocean view, no red carpet, no murmurs of recognition. The woman behind the counter asked my name. I paused, then smiled. Lena, I said. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't a reinvention. It was just the name I gave to the version of myself that was no longer bound by betrayal. I started writing. Not memoirs, not revenge fantasies, just truths about power, about silence, about the strange freedom of no longer being watched. I didn't publish them. I didn't want credit. Some stories aren't for the world. Some are for the soul. He resurfaced once, a year later. A podcast interview. Older, grayer, still handsome in that practiced, hollow way. He blamed toxic culture, jealous board members, and a complicated divorce. He never said my name. He wouldn't dare, but I saw it in his eyes. The haunted look of a man still unsure how he lost everything without a single fight. Because I never screamed. I never threatened. I never made a scene. I made a strategy, and now I live in the quiet. I own vineyards I'll never visit. I lease penthouses I'll never enter. I hold keys to empires I no longer need to control. Because victory, real victory, doesn't require you to stand on your enemy's ruins. Sometimes it just means you're not there anymore when they finally look for you. I stand on a terrace now, overlooking cliffs that fall into an endless blue. The ocean is loud, but my mind is still. I take a sip of wine. I close my eyes, and I remember the woman who once stood by an infinity pool in Los Angeles, phone in hand, realizing the man beside her was an illusion. That woman is gone in her place. Is someone else, someone freer? I smile because this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about awakening, a story of how I took everything, and then I vanished.